David Driscoll, can you please come introduce today's speaker?
Thank you, Chad. Today's speakers really need no introduction, but I'm going to introduce them now for the second time in a span of 15 minutes. In 1991, Nick and Helen Forster started the nationally syndicated radio podcast program called eTown. Based here in Boulder, Nick and Helen's nonprofit organization, also called eTown, has produced more than 3 decades of excellent live music plus social and environmental programming to inform, uplift, and inspire listeners across the country and in more recent times around the world. Along the way, the Forsters established, as I'm sure you all know, eTown Hall, the multifaceted arts and cultural center located in downtown Boulder. We're thrilled that you're here, Nick and Helen. Before they come up to speak, there's a short video that they wanted to show. And Fred, if you're ready, we'll run that now.
All right.
Hey, check.
From the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, it's eTown.
To me, eTown has been one of the great jewels of our community. It is an amazing radio show that combines live performances, green initiatives, conversations with artists. It really is a unique radio show that nobody else has ever come close to. What I really love about eTown is that the artists are in a situation that they haven't really been in before. And Nick and Helen have made it so comfortable for them that they've stretched out and done things that probably was alien to some of the things they felt comfortable with and have done. And it's an amazing process and a growth for the artists.
It's the best show on the planet, man. It's for real, it's earthy.
I mean, this is one of the good ones.
What is eTown? eTown's a radio show, but it's also a community that's built around 2 simple ideas. One is that music brings people together and that we can create a community around great live music. 2 is that we all have an opportunity to take better care of each other and of the planet. And those are the 2 basic ideas that eTown was founded on.
This may have been, my first experience with live radio show, my first invitation to eTown. And, I love radio, especially real radio. eTown is unique because it's not just about music, it's also about community.
It sort of feels like coming back to family, and it always makes me happy that I can be involved with something that to a large extent aligns with my own personal beliefs, political beliefs, social beliefs.
In some ways the music is the magnet. The music brings people in. We really try to integrate the music with the conversation. Our hope is that by the time the show is over, everyone who listened also learned something, they were inspired by somebody doing some amazing things, and they have ideas for ways in which they can get engaged in their communities to make things a little better.
Please welcome back to eTown, Dr. Jane Goodall.
We want to feature stories that inspire our listeners. It's not necessarily to do the same thing, but to say, gee, if he can do that or she can do that, maybe I could do something. Together, we can all make a difference, but we have to work together. We have to at least start and take a chance.
Opened up my guitar case,
I love eTown. I love the fact that they're using entertainment to speak about environmental issues and social causes, and I love to support them.
eTown took a chance on me in the very beginning of my career, and the way they support the idea of community in music is just a really inspiring thing.
That's what kept me locked in. It's like, well, that's cool. I didn't know what to expect, and I genuinely had a ball. I really did.
eTown has been completely independent, not affiliated with a parent corporation, a network, a syndicator, a parent title company. We're on our own. Our small staff decides what we're going to put on the air to reach a national audience every single week. I'm really proud of the fact that eTown, as an independent entity, can produce something positive that is celebratory, great music, inspiring stories, uplifting. And I think now in this day and age, it's more important than ever.
Okay, that's our whole story.
Yeah.
That's it.
We're out of time,
that's
so.
all we got.
Hi, everybody. Just a raise of hands. Have you ever heard of eTown before?
Yeah.
Most people here. Have you ever been to a live taping? Wow. And finally, have you heard it on the air, either on the radio? Wow. This is our crowd, Nick.
Have you ever, raise your hand if you've ever been to our house.
Well, we have to fix that.
Yeah. I think it's poignant for us to be here because there's such a values alignment for what we do and what you do. It's, there are all kinds of challenges for all of us to get through. And by that I mean find a pathway, a career, a family, raise kids, educate our kids, help launch them. That's hard, and it's harder all the time. I think it's getting harder, as I know it's harder for our grandkids to imagine buying a house in Boulder than it was for Helen and me, for example. But I think the reality is that when those challenges are more obvious and more apparent, we can come together and we can see what we can do together on behalf of those who are in need or opportunities that we see, whether it's fire help for the Marshall Fire victims or helping people in Kathmandu, helping women in Kathmandu find a new pathway. Helen and I have been inspired by those opportunities, as you know, through the Achievement Award, which was really Helen's part of eTown every week. That was something she produced.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that segment, and we hear still a lot from our listeners who inquire about who was that, what's the name of their organization, how do I get a hold of them and support them. And fortunately, eTown has generated a lot of support over the years for all sorts of nonprofits and individuals that we featured on the show who are doing everything from cleaning up rivers to helping find homes for the homeless, feed the hungry, just help the disadvantaged in any way. Basically to, as you all know, because you've heard it and seen it before, it's to help people identify problems and not be afraid to take a step and try and see what you can do. And I think these award winners have served as wonderful role models for a lot of our listeners as well.
I think the early genesis of the show was really a little more focused on climate change and the obvious environmental degradation that I'd seen. One of the beautiful things about being a musician is you get to travel all the time. So I feel really lucky with Hot Rise, and even after Hot Rise, I was finding myself, playing in Japan or Bulgaria or Turkey or Finland or wherever it was. We traveled a lot and we played in a lot of different places. But particularly in Eastern Europe in 1990, I got to see what happens when there is no EPA and government and industry are exactly the same. The environment suffers, and it was palpable. The air was bad. The water looked sort of despoiled. The agricultural fields looked played out. And we've got 3 kids. I was thinking, man, this is a glimpse into a future that I don't want to see. I don't want our kids or grandkids to see. So that was the beginning of eTown. It's like, is there a way? Helen had been, as her little clip demonstrated, she was one of the co-owners of the Telluride Bluegrass Festival.
That's true.
And she moved to Telluride in 1973 right after the main street was paved.
That's true. And a lot of people don't know this about me. You'll see these in magazines. 6 things you don't know about me. I lived for 6 years with no running water and no heat or insulation. So I went out with my young friends in my 20s, and we took down standing dead trees, and we heated our homes with fireplaces and old ancient cook stoves. And I had my outhouse. It was very deluxe. It was a 2-seater. Never really understood why.
Yeah, what's the point of that? Let me think. Yeah.
Gonna go out with a friend, discuss the article you're reading. But yeah, that taught me a lot about, just the fact that I had to take my 55-gallon drum and drive it to the heart of Placerville, the little town nearby, and fill it up with water when I needed water, and get my friends to help me put it up so I had, the gravity pull for everything, and you wouldn't know it. You'd walk into my little house, and I had a sink with faucets and all that. And we were a very hardy bunch of people in the 70s when we were there in our 20s. But it taught me about the value of our resources, of our water, of our energy and where it comes from, our air. And I felt very fortunate to have that experience. I'm not doing that anymore, obviously, but I think through the show, to me, and that's why I love the awards so much, it was always giving examples of what you can do. Just try. And usually it would start with somebody who, one person that comes to mind is a soccer mother who was watching her kids on a really hot day, and a young, about 20-year-old pregnant hippie girl with no shoes came up and begged for water. And she thought, that's crazy, that's not right. She started a little organization to help people like that get back on their feet, to get shoes, to get a job, to get a place to live, to get resources. And today it's nationwide. So just like that little pebble in the river that sends out those circles, I think that's what our show was about in terms of bringing people in. And as Nick said, the hook was the music, and we brought in all kinds of people. We heard from policemen in Minnesota that loved the show. We heard from a fella in Texas who said, I'm a real conservative Republican, and sometimes what you say on that show makes my blood boil, but I never miss it. And we were connecting, and that's what Rotary is about, is understanding that we're all connected, and but for the grace of God, could go you or I in a tough situation. So I'm really thrilled to be here, and I'm just going to say before we go on that I'm going to join the Rotary. I'm very excited.
Anyway, we've had quite the journey building eTown up from the very beginning. I think the early going of launching anything, I'm sure most of you have had some experience with this, that we started with an idea, we didn't really have funding, we presumed that it would be easier than it was, we bluffed our way into, actually, frankly, I think our ignorance really worked to our advantage. I remember going to a public radio conference in New Orleans right in May of '91. I think we'd only done maybe 1 or 2 shows. And I had a display table, and I printed up T-shirts and tapes and little brochures, and I wore a suit, and I had a little name tag, and I had a big banner that said eTown, and people would come and say, well, this is interesting. Is this going to be a 59-minute hour, or are you going to be news compatible? And I'd say, we're going to be compatible. Yeah, compatible. We're going to be compatible. Yeah. Are you going to do 13 weeks or 39 weeks? It's like, what do most people do? We just didn't know a thing. And but NPR actually, after having rejected my earlier entreaties, when I kind of thought I was a bigger deal than I really was, and I called them and said, hi, this is Nick Forster from Hot Rise, and I've got a fabulous new idea for a show. And they were like, go away, So, but they did pick up a tape, and they gave us actually an opportunity to launch in the fall of '91, which we did. We soon ran out of money, went off the air, tucked our tail between our legs, and kind of regrouped. But we figured it out, and we persevered, and we've been on the air ever since. And we created eTown Hall, which was a long-term vision. A small story, just because I know that everyone here has had some opportunity to be frustrated with city government. I went to the city and I said, boy, we'd really like to buy this building. They said, well, you can buy it, but you can't use it because eTown's not a church. And so it was sold to the Salvation Army in 1991, and they ran it for 10 years. And then they put it up for sale, and I went back to the city, hey, I'd really like to buy this building. He said, well, you can buy it, you just can't use it. And then Steve Tebow bought it. And I said, now wait a minute. He might think he's God, but he's not a church. And so that began a journey where Steve and I actually worked together, and we went to the city. But I did eventually go online and get ordained. And I went back to the city and I said, look, we're a 501c3. I'm an ordained minister. We do a lot of singing. We celebrate good works in the community. Damn it, we want a building permit. We want to be able to do this. And they acquiesced eventually. And so,
if he shows up to this day, those that were there at the time call him the Rev.
Yeah.
As he's walking, here comes the Rev.
Yeah. I was a thorn in the planning department side for a little while. But anyway, but we did the same thing. We persevered. And eTown Hall is something that we are proud of and confident it will outlive us and serve the community for many years after we're gone. And it's built on the same kind of values you share here. We're bringing people together because of the music. We're also making sure that we didn't run natural gas into the building because we have 56 kilowatts of photovoltaic panels up on the roof. We had to walk our talk with that. There are things each of us can do, and the fact is you guys know all about that, so we're not telling you anything new. We're honored that you invited us to be here. I know there's an opportunity for some questions. We have some endless amount of stories. You could see from the movie that we've been lucky enough to play music with lots and lots and lots of people. And many of them have become friends or people we've stayed in touch with.
And our award winners too.
Award winners, interview guests.
Many of them have remained friends of eTown, some of which the people who got on their feet have come back and donated to eTown, saying thank you for the chance you gave me to be on the air and build my nonprofit and do the work I'm doing. So we're really honored by that.
Before we go to questions, I just want to be honest with you and tell you that COVID was kind of a challenge for us.
For everybody.
We stopped doing live shows.
Mm-hmm. We canceled our last show, which was March 14th. We had our show on March 1st. We were anticipating. We didn't want to bring people together because we thought this thing is going to be really serious. And then a few days later, after we canceled our show, everything was shut down. Then I got COVID, and it was, I'm sure some of you have too, and it's a very difficult illness, and it does give you long-term problems. Fortunately, that was almost 2 years ago, so I'm fully recovered from my long-haul stuff, but it really shut down everything. And we realized that eTown had been this really well-oiled machine. We were just putting out the shows and booking the shows and editing the shows and doing the shows. And we had a whole team, probably 30, 40 people a day of show and a small group outside of the show, and all that ground to a halt. And we really had to step back and kind of reevaluate what needed to be done to still keep in touch and keep the message out there.
There is a silver lining to the pandemic for many of us. Whether we know it or not, there have been upsides. And for us, the upside was just to get off the hamster wheel, just to stop producing shows for a little while and step back and say, well, what are we doing that's effective? What are we doing that nobody else can do better than us? What do we want to do as we age in these jobs that we've had for 30 years? What's coming next? Who else is going to carry the torch? Who's going to carry on after us? And so,
and also, how can we stay in touch and keep helping our ever-expanding audience, those people that are looking for inspiration and hope at this time?
So we've experimented with some different things. I launched something called Hippie Bluegrass Church. We did a series called Teach Me One Thing. We're starting something called Solar Sessions. We're doing more visual programming. We have a lot of subscribers to our YouTube channel, but
I have to say this because it's my baby, but we're working on looking back at award winners and then getting in touch with them today to see how they're doing and what they need. So that's going to be a podcast that's going to come out probably in the fall.
So somewhere between a whole cloth reinvention of eTown and a launch of a whole bunch of different products, or eventually we're going to hand the reins off to the next generation. But that's where we are now, which was really an interesting place to find ourselves, which is enjoying the fact that we can be thoughtful and improvise and experiment, which is what creative people do. So thank you again for inviting us. Thanks for sharing, giving us a chance to share a little bit of our story. I know Helen and I both feel like Colorado is our home. As she said, she moved here in '73. I hitchhiked to Colorado for the first time in '73, and then came back in '74 and moved here in '75. And on my very first day in Colorado back then, somebody said, "Let's go to Boulder and bring your mandolin." And so I went up to North Broadway to a place called the Colorado Coal Company and got in some big jam session on stage in late 1975. But we've been here ever since and feel really happy to have raised our kids here and feel a part of this community.
And we're so honored that we feel humbled that you invited us to come be with you today. And if anybody has any questions, just please let us know. Hi, Sue.
Can you give us an update on the concert that you did last week to raise funds for the fire survivors?
On Monday, yeah.
Yeah, the Marshall Fire Benefit was on Monday, and there were, it was a virtual concert, and I was the host of it, and we raised $750,000 for Marshall Fire victims. And there was an enormous amount of support from the music community, and in general, our congressional delegation was represented in the show as well, but it was a success. Did you have a question here?
Oh, we're going to actually go to Nancy online. She has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, hi Helen and Nick, how you doing? Hope everything's well. Yeah, I'm on the huge screen. So I was an ambassador of Chamber, I still am. So we visited eTown numerous times, had a lot of events. So thank you very much. And yes, you are a part of the community. My question to you is, with so many musicians coming through your doors at eTown, who was the most, one or two, exciting musicians you interviewed? Kind of like knocked your feet off.
What's that?
It's fun.
Go first, did you say? James Taylor. The fact that James Taylor came the first time was amazing. He's an incredible individual, and he just came on his own. You know, he came with his guitar, played with us. And he's become a friend, and he's come back several times. As far as interviewing people, I always have to say, and she's my hero, Jane Goodall has done such amazing work that I really was thrilled and blessed that she came not once but twice.
I got to interact with a lot of my musical heroes from when I was growing up in the Hudson Valley in New York, and being a bluegrass guy, to have people like Doc Watson and Earl Scruggs and Ralph Stanley, and but the most powerful one for me was perhaps Pop Staples, who was the father and the principal songwriter and guitar player for the band, the legendary Staples Singers, who were in many ways the soundtrack for the civil rights movement. And Pop Staples came to eTown a couple of times, and we had a really nice connection. And that was perhaps the most meaningful one for me.
I have to interject a little story about Pops. He came and the eTones played with him, and Nick played guitar, and afterwards he came up to Nick and he said, "Now Nick, I'd like to adopt you." I think that made your day.
That made my life, yeah.
He loved his playing. That was really sweet.
I was at the Olympic Lounge one night, and the Hot Rise played, and then all of a sudden Red Nichols came on.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Sure, yeah. They were never actually seen together at the same time, but Hot Rise always traveled with another band called Red Knuckles and the Trailblazers, and the Trailblazers played honky-tonk music and played at the Olympic Lounge, played at Peggy's High-Low, played at all the honky-tonks there were. And that was an opportunity. Basically, the thing that young musicians don't recognize now is that in the 70s, when you were in a band and you got a gig, you played in a bar. And if you played in a bar, you played from 9 to 1. That's just you. You don't have an opening act. You don't have, you played the whole night, 9 to 1. And we started playing in Wyoming and, all throughout the western U.S. And so around 11 o'clock, as people started getting a little bit liquored up, somebody would come up and say, you know any Bob Wills? You know any Hank Williams? Can you play some, Western swing? And so we did know all those songs, and so we eventually got Red Knuckles and the Trailblazers to play them all.
Fantastic.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Actually, I have a comment. Thank you for being here and keeping music humming and popping and hopping. And we're delighted to have the indication of one of you as a potential member. However, there is no reason that can't be a twofer. Now, there's no reduction. It's not a 2-for-1 for membership. However, we do have couples, and there are 2 of them right now in this room. So we'd welcome you both for come back and join us and be part of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're so lucky to have people who know so much about music here that I'm curious. A lot of us have those albums that are kind of our warm blanket. I'm wondering if you could give us a couple of the albums that you all go back to over and over again.
Wow, that's a really good question. Music is such a part of the fabric of our lives that we are familiar with so many different artists and things that it's sort of about what mood you're in. And so if you want to sort of reinforce how you're feeling or change your mood, then you're going to choose that particular album. I will say that lately, we've been really inspired by songwriting. I'll say, just sort of as a confession, I got into music because I was really intrigued with the playing, and I wanted to learn how to play guitar or mandolin or banjo or whatever, and I was really focused on the technique of playing and building my skills. And I was a little slow on really recognizing the importance of songwriting. Obviously, growing up with the Beatles and Bob Dylan, it's not like I wasn't aware of songwriting, but fact is, we've become more appreciative of songs as we've gotten older. And so lately, we've been listening to Lucinda Williams records, and we've been listening to old Los Lobos records, and things where the songs and the sounds are integrated so well. But I will tell you, there are, in our house, an awful lot of vinyl albums and things to choose among. So,
I will say that as a young person, I was extremely shy. And my mother actually took me when I was 6 and my sister was 9. My mother was terminally shy too. And she took us to acting classes to try to draw us out, and that's how I got in touch with what I was supposed to do, which is perform. But as a teenager and 20-something, early 20, I was drawn to vocalists, and that's what really encouraged me and allowed me to have the idea that I could sing. And 2 of those were Linda Ronstadt, anything she did, and Joni Mitchell, because of the songwriting, and probably particularly Court and Spark was a album that really inspired me.
Blue was the one for me.
Yeah, Blue is great too. But yeah, that was, and it was a time when you it seemed like there were 2 camps. You were either into the Dead, or you were into the singer-songwriters like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Emmylou Harris, and that sort of thing. And I kind of went in that direction. But it really did. It brought me out of my shell. And I walked into a party one time, and I said, I'm not going to be shy. I'm not going to cast my eyes down. I was 16, I think. And I opened the door and said, hi, everybody. And they all went, hi. And then I went over to whoever was playing and singing and jumped right in. And I never looked back.
Any other questions?
Yeah, quick question. You mentioned that in 1991 you ran out of money and you had to pull the plug and you sort of ran with your tail between your legs. I'd like to know what happened, what inspirational moment, what was it that got you back to where you are today, that started that path back upwards?
That's interesting.
The main thing was we needed to recognize different ways of sustaining the show, because I went into this whole thing thinking NPR was going to write us a big check. Like when they said yes, I was like, okay, great. Yes, and where's the money? And they were like, oh, no, we're just going to distribute your program. So I had to learn a lot about pro forma budgets and figuring out how to book talent without spending too much, and how to maximize revenue from ticket sales and bar sales and other things. But the real turning point, there's a person you may know in this community. His name is Paul Repetto. Paul Repetto is a guy who was the co-founder of Horizon Dairy. He was on our board at the time, and he said, you know, what you do would appeal to the natural products community, and I think you should go to the Natural Products Expo out in Anaheim, California, and do a live eTown show, because the show is aligned with their values. So we did that. We raised, I told him, I don't have the money to do that. He said, we'll find $5,000 sponsors for your show. We'll make it a benefit. He helped us navigate. And we did our show at the Anaheim Convention Center. The next day I walked the floor and went to, in those days you go to the Ben & Jerry booth and there's Ben & Jerry. You go to Tom's of Maine, there's Tom. There's, Mo Siegel at Celestial. I literally was able to come back from that trip with, I think, about $300,000 in advertising for eTown, which was the beginning of a long relationship in the natural products community. I've been the person who's been responsible for raising all the money for eTown, so I went from there and continued to sell advertising, predominantly in the natural foods arena, for decades, until about 10 years ago, when everybody started giving their money to Facebook.
I will say it was an interesting question that you raised, because at the time we were like, gosh, what do we do? But it wasn't like, oh, well, we're just going to figure that out. And it's sort of, we'd get by. I remember one of the first seasons we were sponsored by the John and Helen Subak Memorial Fund, which was, my second parent had recently passed away, and when that happens, you usually come into some sort of, as my dad would say, chunk of change. And I took that modest amount and I kept the show going through that. And then around the same time when that was not...
$25,000.
Yeah. And then when Nick's parent passed shortly after we ran out of money again, he did the same. And then about 4 years in, we had been part of the cultural programming package at NPR. And they were running scared because of restrictions that were coming from Congress at the time, wanting to cut funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcast and other entities. So they started cutting shows from their cultural programming package at the time that might seem controversial or, a little bit too...
hippie.
Too, on the fringe or whatever. So they cut Afropop, Blues Stage, Club del Sol, and we almost made the cut, but because we were growing phenomenally at the time, and yet at the 11th hour they cut us, and it was like, oh, there's our distribution. What do we do? And then it was like, well, that's worth about $20,000, and they give that pro bono for that distribution. Let's raise $20,000. And we not only raised $20,000, but we raised more, and we were able to purchase our distribution and continue on NPR with all our stations. Plus, because we weren't an NPR show anymore, but we were an independent, we were able to go to commercial stations, and we increased our listenership, I think it was by another 50%. We had 1/3 commercial now and 2/3 public stations, college stations, and so forth. So it actually ended up being a great opportunity. But at the time, it was like, how are we going to do this? But I think we just sort of believe so much in the concept of bringing people together. Music is such an international, universal language. It opens up the heart, So we just believed in it and prevailed, and here we are.
Fantastic. And remember that we don't own eTown. eTown's a nonprofit organization we started. We don't own eTown Hall. We've done this all for 30 years for our community and for the greater community. And I just want to leave by saying, At this moment, with uncertainty in Ukraine and in the world as a result, and with particularly sort of rancorous divisiveness here at home, we are more committed than ever to the power of music and the arts to bring people together and to cut across those kinds of boundaries and borders and connect people on behalf of real issues that we do share, real opportunities that we share to make things better. So thank you again for having us as your guests at Rotary.
Pardon? Oh, yeah, there you go. You just put it closer. Okay. There it is. I'm not that used to using a mic. It is so special to have eTown, known internationally, located here in Boulder. And your talents and unique eTown are really a gift to us all. And no, we would love to have you come back. One of the Rotary's top priorities, as you may know, is the eradication of polio. And we are so close to being able to do that. And in your honor, we are donating 100 doses of polio vaccine to help reach that end. Thank you again so much.